Aaron Hartley never missed a day of work, and Melissa Hartley never missed a chance to smile for the camera until one of them disappeared, and the other secrets began to unravel. Aaron Hartley wasn't the kind of man people suspected would go missing. He lived an ordinary, structured life. Every weekday he left home at exactly 7:25 a.m. to reach the middle school where he taught science. She worked part-time at a cozy interior design store in town, and she often posted warm, glowing updates about their life together on social media. Pictures of Sunday brunches, fall hikes, and anniversary getaways filled her timeline, giving the impression of a couple who never drifted apart. Melissa, always dressed in soft pastels and neutral tones, seemed to play the part of the happy wife effortlessly. He had close relationships with his siblings, especially his younger sister Lauren, who said she'd spoken to him the week before. Meanwhile, Melissa stayed in the home they had shared, often seen pacing the front porch while talking on the phone or sitting on the steps with her head in her hands. Melissa couldn't remember basic details about the day Aaron disappeared. When asked what time he left or what he was wearing, she gave inconsistent answers. She said she went by herself just to clear her head and celebrate quietly. Aaron's car, a silver Honda Civic, had not been located. There were no reports of it being impounded or ticketed. No gas station footage showed him filling up. It was as if he and the vehicle had both been swallowed by the earth. It sounded odd, but not impossible. Still, the lie about the anniversary post, the picture she uploaded online, began to raise suspicion. A few admitted they hadn't seen him at all in the past week. One neighbor even mentioned Melissa had been unusually quiet, no music from the backyard, no conversations drifting through the kitchen windows. What they didn't know yet was that Melissa had secrets. Secrets that went deeper than an affair or a failing marriage. Secrets that would soon turn a missing person case into a homicide investigation. The illusion of a perfect life had started to crack. What waited beneath was far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. A delivery driver said he dropped off a package a few days before the anniversary and saw Melissa through the door window alone, sitting silently in the living room with all the lights off. The metadata from the image revealed that it had been taken 2 weeks prior at their home, not in a restaurant. She had posed it as a fresh memory when, in reality, it was old. One officer noted that she changed her story multiple times during the same conversation. First, she said they had coffee together before he left. Later, she claimed she hadn't seen him at all that morning. And the fact that Aaron's last known activity had been weeks earlier all pointed to one chilling possibility. Aaron Hartley may not have vanished. He may never have made it to their anniversary at all. She seemed exhausted, but there was a sense that she was trying too hard. She participated in a local news interview, wiping away tears as she begged for anyone with information to come forward. When detectives checked security footage from the restaurant where the couple had supposedly celebrated their anniversary, they found no record of Aaron being there. Melissa was visible, sitting alone at a corner table, eating dinner by herself. She had paid the bill and left within 40 minutes. She never mentioned dining alone during the interview. According to her, they had a wonderful evening together. Her face was everywhere: flyers, Facebook posts, community bulletins. She was a grieving wife caught in a nightmare. Everything had sounded fine. He had mentioned plans for a quiet anniversary dinner with Melissa, nothing unusual. Yet now he wasn't answering calls or texts. His social media accounts were inactive. Melissa had no explanation except that maybe he needed a break. But no one could have guessed that behind the polished facade of their marriage, something had begun to decay. His students loved his soft-spoken demeanor, and fellow teachers admired his calm presence. After school, he usually stopped at the same gas station to pick up a drink before heading home to his wife, Melissa. His boss had called Melissa to ask why Aaron hadn't come to work. That was the first red flag. Aaron was never late, never sick without notice. Concerned, the school principal notified the police. Melissa answered the door in a robe, eyes red from what appeared to be crying. She told officers she thought he had left for work early that morning. His car was gone and his phone was turned off. She said she assumed he had just gone straight from home to school. But when the police checked traffic cameras, there was no sign of his vehicle anywhere on the route he usually took. The car had seemingly vanished too. Their home sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in the suburban town of Evergreen Hills, with trimmed hedges, flower beds, and a white mailbox that bore their last name in neat black letters. Nothing about their life ever raised eyebrows. To anyone looking in, they were the image of normalcy. Aaron and Melissa had been married for 6 years, and everyone around them believed they were still in love. Their 6th wedding anniversary came and went quietly. Melissa posted a photo the following morning of the two of them sitting side by side, smiling in front of a chocolate lava cake with a lit candle. The caption read, "Still feels like the honeymoon phase, number 6 years strong." Friends commented with heart emojis and congratulations. From the outside, it seemed like just another joyful milestone for the Hartleys. But in reality, that anniversary dinner never happened. 2 days later, Aaron was reported missing. The initial search for Aaron was quiet but urgent. He wasn't the type to just leave without telling anyone. Police began a standard missing person investigation, checking hospitals and nearby hotels, reaching out to friends, and requesting surveillance footage from local businesses. But for detectives assigned to the case, things began to feel strange early on. Then came the first major clue and inconsistency that unraveled part of her story. When confronted, Melissa explained that Aaron had canceled last minute due to a headache, and she hadn't wanted to waste the reservation. What initially appeared to be a normal disappearance slowly turned into something more sinister. Police spoke to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen Aaron in the days leading up to the anniversary. By the end of the first week, the case had taken on a darker tone. Melissa's strange behavior, the inconsistencies in her story, but without a body, a crime scene or solid proof, detectives were still working in the shadows. Melissa Hartley sat alone in the living room of her perfectly kept home, the television on but muted, the volume of her thoughts drowning everything else. Outside, a yellow ribbon clung to the porch column, flapping gently in the summer breeze, a symbol of hope, though hope was beginning to fade. It had been 9 days since Aaron Hartley had been seen, and whispers were spreading across Evergreen Hills. The neighbors who once waved politely from driveways were now peeking through curtains, asking each other what really happened behind the closed doors of the Hartley home. Police had ramped up their investigation. What began as a standard missing person case had started to feel more like a mystery wrapped in lies. No one family, friends, co-workers had seen or spoken to him since then. At first, she seemed eager to answer questions, but now she appeared guarded, irritated, even evasive. She started declining media requests. Her social media went silent. One detective noted that she had given them permission to search the house, but grew nervous when they mentioned taking Aaron's laptop in for forensic analysis. Brandon lived 40 minutes away and worked as a personal trainer. He had no criminal record, but he was the first real connection to Melissa's double life. When detectives found him, Brandon was cooperative. He admitted to the relationship. He claimed Melissa told him she was in the middle of a divorce and that Aaron had already moved out. He was shocked to learn Aaron was still living in the home up until his disappearance. It was a subtle reaction, but enough to make investigators uneasy. The anniversary post, the dinner story, all of it began to feel like a smokescreen. What looked like a simple disappearance had become a chilling puzzle. And every piece now pointed toward Melissa not as a widow, but as someone who knew far more than she ever let on. His internet history had been erased, but not well. And what they found slowly pulled back the mask of the perfect suburban wife. Her phone, once unlocked freely for police, was now under scrutiny with a warrant. Inside it were layers of secrecy, encrypted chat apps, photos hidden in folders named innocuously like invoices, and evidence of online dating activity going back over a year. Forensics recovered traces of visits to law firm websites, specifically divorce and separation advice pages. There were notes about financial planning and a spreadsheet labeled contingencies. All of it pointed to someone preparing for a major life change. It wasn't damning, but it did indicate that Aaron had been considering ending the marriage. And at the center of it stood Melissa, who was increasingly becoming less of a grieving wife and more of a person of interest. Every new piece of information they uncovered seemed to contradict something Melissa had previously said. And worse, every lead that should have brought them closer to Aaron only raised more questions. About a week before Aaron vanished, she had told him not to message her for a few days because her ex might come by to pick up the rest of his things. At the time, it didn't strike him as odd. Now, it sent a chill down his spine. They began combing through Aaron's daily routine. He was meticulous, a creature of habit. His phone records, bank activity, and even his smartwatch data from the week before his disappearance revealed a life lived in strict rhythm. He walked the same path, taught the same hours, shopped at the same stores. But something happened in the final stretch. His digital footprint abruptly stopped. His smartwatch hadn't recorded movement in 5 days prior to Melissa's claimed timeline. His bank account had no new transactions. His phone had been powered off, or more likely destroyed. A few close colleagues at the school were contacted. One remembered Aaron being unusually distracted in his last few days, occasionally staring at his phone during staff meetings. He had seemed tense, but he hadn't said much about what was bothering him. He was private like that, respectful but distant. His disappearance felt sudden and impossible, like he had been erased. Detectives began piecing together a timeline and realized something chilling. The last verifiable sighting of Aaron Hartley was not on the day of the supposed anniversary dinner, but at least 6 days before. She had stopped cooperating fully. When the device was searched, it appeared almost too clean. That shifted the tone of the investigation even more. Detectives started to dig deeper into Melissa's life. The name Brandon Pierce surfaced multiple times. He was tagged in a few deleted photos, mentioned in messages retrieved through data recovery tools. Brandon said Melissa never seemed anxious or rushed, but there had been one peculiar moment. Investigators began cross-referencing Melissa's story with evidence. GPS records showed that Melissa had driven to a remote storage unit just 3 days after Aaron was last seen. The unit was rented under a name she had used before marriage, Melissa Carrington. When asked, she claimed she stored old furniture and office supplies there. Police didn't press immediately but noted the address carefully. Melissa's financial history added to the growing suspicion. 8 months prior, she had purchased a life insurance policy on Aaron for $750,000. She claimed it was suggested by a financial advisor to plan for the future, but the timing of the policy raised red flags. The premiums were paid through a separate account Melissa had set up without Aaron's name. She had also withdrawn small amounts from their joint account regularly over the course of a year, slowly siphoning funds into this second account, just enough to avoid triggering alarms. At this point, the detective team working the case agreed. It was no longer a question of whether Aaron had simply left. The evidence pointed toward a deliberate act. Whether it was premeditated murder or a cover-up gone wrong, they were inching closer to the truth. The problem was, without a body, everything remained circumstantial. One final discovery changed that. A nearby farmer, unaware of the investigation's details, reported an abandoned vehicle that had been parked at the edge of a field for nearly 2 weeks. It matched the description of Aaron's car. Police arrived at the scene within hours. The silver Honda Civic was coated in dust, windows rolled up, doors locked. Inside, the passenger seat was clean, but the driver's seat showed signs of a struggle, faint traces of blood on the headrest, a broken phone charger cable hanging loose, and a small earring caught between the seat cushions. Melissa didn't wear earrings often, but she had been seen with that specific one in past photos. The car was towed and processed, and blood samples confirmed it belonged to Aaron. What had once been a frustrating dead end had now turned into a crime scene. Still, Melissa remained free, not yet charged, but fully aware that she was being watched. In the calm, orderly streets of Evergreen Hills, the story unfolding inside the Hartley home was beginning to resemble something much darker than anyone expected. The discovery of Aaron Hartley's abandoned car marked a turning point in the investigation. What had once been an unnerving mystery was now an active crime scene. Forensic teams combed every inch of the vehicle. The faint smear of blood on the driver's seat was confirmed to match Aaron's DNA. Though not substantial in quantity, its presence indicated that some kind of injury had occurred while he was behind the wheel, perhaps after he had already been incapacitated and placed there. The broken phone charger, the lone earring caught in the upholstery, and the complete lack of fingerprints aside from Aaron's added to the unease. Police obtained another warrant to search the Hartley home more thoroughly, this time with the knowledge that they were not just looking for signs of a missing man, but possible evidence of foul play. The space had not been searched thoroughly before, only photographed. Investigators now believed they had a murder weapon. But even with mounting evidence, Melissa had not been officially charged. Hidden among her deleted files were screenshots of flight confirmations, hotel reservations in a different name, and one note that simply read, "After it's done." The timestamp placed the note exactly 1 day before Erin's last verified activity, and maintained her carefully crafted image, decided on a plan that would allow her to do both. Online forums began dissecting her social media posts, comparing timestamps and backgrounds. One amateur sleuth noticed that a photo Melissa posted claiming to be from the anniversary dinner featured a wine glass with lipstick smudged in 2 places, though restaurant staff confirmed she had dined alone. She had paid the deposit on a rental cabin under a fake name, reserved starting the weekend after Erin disappeared. She had intended to vanish once the missing person search cooled down and the insurance payout was processed. Melissa was arrested on suspicion of murder, obstruction, and fraud. As she was taken into custody, neighbors watched from a distance. Some filmed on their phones, others simply shook their heads. With Erin gone, she could collect his life insurance policy, erase their history, and start fresh with Brandon. And now, behind that mask, police had uncovered something cold and calculating. The story of Erin Hartley was no longer about a man who vanished. It had become a story about deception, betrayal, and the chilling lengths one person would go to maintain a lie. A former coworker from the interior design boutique recalled Melissa mentioning that she couldn't stand the way Aaron looked at her anymore. Another remembered her saying she felt trapped and wanted a way out. There were too many loose threads, too many details that didn't add up. Her attempts to control the narrative through fake anniversary photos, controlled public appearances, and a carefully curated digital life had failed. At the time, these statements didn't raise alarms. Now they seemed like confessions in hindsight. The $750,000 payout would be enough to disappear, especially with her staged social media presence giving the illusion of heartbreak and confusion. The phrase was chilling, vague enough to deny in court, but damning when viewed through the lens of what followed. The prosecution wanted to build a case that was airtight, so the detectives kept digging. Now, with a new warrant, they opened every bin, every box, every bag. One plastic bin contained assorted cleaning products: bleach, gloves, garbage bags, scrub brushes. Another held a collection of clothes, mostly men's, some folded, others thrown in loosely. A duffel bag tucked into the corner held what would become the most damning evidence yet. Inside were stained towels, a hammer with traces of blood and hair, and a wallet. Erin's Melissa, now less cooperative and visibly strained under the weight of suspicion, was asked to remain outside during the process. She stood silently on the lawn, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Whispers were no longer quiet. The woman once seen as poised and friendly was now the center of a growing storm. When questioned again, Brandon appeared nervous but consistent. He insisted Melissa had told him she was separated. He provided his own messages as evidence. There was nothing that indicated Brandon was involved in Erin's disappearance, and the timeline showed he hadn't been near Evergreen Hills on the day Erin vanished. Still, Melissa's plans had clearly included a future with him, whether or not he knew the full truth. Inside the house, investigators found what they had missed during the initial walkthrough. In the laundry room, behind a stack of towels, a dark smear lined the edge of the wall. Inside were several items that raised eyebrows: a prepaid burner phone, a second set of keys to the storage unit they had already been investigating. Erin had likely discovered Melissa's affair. The evidence on his laptop and in his notes pointed to a man preparing to leave his marriage. He had looked up divorce laws, financial separation, and even temporary housing options. But he never made a move. Someone had stopped him? And 3 blank checks signed in Erin's handwriting, although later, analysis would determine the signatures had been forged. It was faint and nearly invisible under normal lighting, but luminol revealed a different story. Blood splatter dotted the baseboards. It had been cleaned, but not well enough. Forensics teams documented and tested it once again, Aaron's DNA. In the bedroom closet, they uncovered a small locked box hidden behind rows of Melissa's shoes. Detectives began to piece together a narrative they had only suspected in fragments. When police returned to the storage unit under Melissa's maiden name, they brought a forensic team with them. The blood on the towels matched Aaron's DNA, and the hammer was sent for further analysis. They returned to Melissa's digital history. Her phone revealed more than just messages and photos. The relationship with Brandon Pierce, the man she had been seeing behind Aaron's back, became even more relevant. Detectives began to develop a working theory. Melissa, desperate to escape her crumbling marriage, but the illusion was already failing. As the evidence mounted, so did the public scrutiny. News stations picked up the story. Friends who once defended her now expressed doubt. One final twist emerged when forensic accountants traced a wire transfer from Melissa's secret account to a small property management firm in another state, but the web she had spun was collapsing. Detectives had enough to move forward. While a body had still not been found, the weight of the circumstantial and physical evidence was overwhelming. The woman who once smiled at block parties, who posted loving captions and shared home decorating tips, had been living a double life. The arrest of Melissa Hartley sent a shockwave through the community of Evergreen Hills. The polished image of the devoted wife had officially shattered, and in its place stood a woman now accused of something unspeakable. But despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence and mounting forensic clues, the investigation remained incomplete. One critical piece was still missing: Aaron Hartley's body. Without it, prosecutors feared that Melissa might still find a way to argue her innocence. But she wasn't talking. Not to detectives, not to her lawyer, not to anyone. Inside the sterile walls of the county detention center, Melissa kept to herself. The injuries were consistent with the shape and weight of the hammer found in the storage unit. He had been killed quickly, likely without warning. Prosecutors now had what they needed to charge Melissa with first-degree murder. In the weeks leading up to the crime, Melissa had searched topics like how to make someone disappear, can blood be traced after cleaning, and how long for an insurance payout after death. Her browsing history painted a picture of a mind that had already committed the crime before ever lifting the weapon. It was calculated, meticulous, and cold. They walked the jury through the digital evidence, the blood traces in the laundry room, the murder weapon, and the life insurance documents. Her attorney attempted to argue that Aaron had left her and that someone else must have committed the murder. They claimed the blood evidence could have come from a past injury and the forged checks were unrelated. But the jury wasn't convinced. The deception had been too elaborate, the evidence too damning. After just 5 hours of deliberation, the verdict was announced: guilty of first-degree murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. They revealed the photos of Melissa dining alone on their anniversary while pretending publicly that Aaron was beside her. They showed the receipts, the car, the grave. People returned to their daily lives, though the shadow of what had happened lingered. For many, the lesson was simple but haunting. Appearances can lie, smiles can hide secrets. And sometimes the person you trust the most is the one you should fear. The premeditation was clear: purchasing cleaning supplies, taking out the life insurance policy, planning a rental under a fake name, and creating a digital alibi on social media. The murder hadn't been impulsive. It had been designed. The courtroom was silent as the judge read her fate. Aaron's family embraced, tears falling freely. They had waited for months not just for justice, but for truth. Aaron had never seen it coming. By the time he discovered the truth, it was already too late. The truth about what happened to their son, brother, and friend. The truth that had been buried as deeply as Aaron himself. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. Investigators theorized that he had been attacked while sleeping or otherwise unaware. What was chilling was how organized the disposal had been. Or a sudden accident that ended his life. It was the person who had stood beside him at the altar, celebrated anniversaries with him, and promised to love him forever. Melissa hadn't panicked. She had driven the body to a remote site, buried it, and then returned home. 2 days later, she had staged their anniversary post, smiling in photos with a man who was already dead. She refused interviews and avoided eye contact with guards. Her silence only made the public more fascinated and horrified. Blood on the handle and hair caught in the metal grooves matched Aaron's DNA. It was likely the murder weapon. But investigators needed more than probability. They needed to know how the crime had unfolded, and most importantly, where Melissa had disposed of the body. The life insurance policy had not just been a single policy, she had taken out a second one through a different provider, doubling the payout amount. She had spoken with a financial advisor using a fake name and asked hypothetical questions about how fast beneficiaries received funds after a spouse's death. The layers of deception ran deep. The news stations ran nightly updates, comparing her to other infamous cases of spouses who had staged grief while hiding secrets. One was the image she projected to the world, smiling anniversary posts, heartfelt captions, a supportive spouse. The other was a secret, darker path paved with lies, manipulation, and control. She had planned not just to kill her husband, but to erase him cleanly. Had Aaron's body never been found, she might have succeeded. But in the end, even the most careful lies leave cracks. But behind the media frenzy, the investigation was far from over. Detectives were still chasing the truth. Where had she hidden him? The hammer found in the storage unit was being processed by forensic teams. Then came a development no one expected. A hiker, walking near the outskirts of an abandoned property 15 miles outside Evergreen Hills, called in a report about a foul smell. It wasn't unusual for wild animals to die in the woods, but something about the stench and the way the ground had been disturbed set off alarms. When officers arrived on the scene, they immediately cordoned off the area. The shallow grave had been covered with branches and loose dirt, but the remains had begun to surface, just enough to reveal what lay beneath. The coroner confirmed it was a male body, badly decomposed but wearing clothing that matched Aaron's last known outfit. Dental records gave confirmation within 48 hours. The grave had been dug behind an abandoned farmhouse once owned by Melissa's aunt, a property that had sat empty for over a decade. Investigators quickly learned that Melissa had visited the location a week before. Aaron's disappearance surveillance from a nearby gas station showed her buying fuel and snacks on the way there. It was the same day Aaron had stopped using his phone and smartwatch. The timeline now connected perfectly. The medical examiner determined that Aaron had died from blunt force trauma to the head. With the discovery of the body, the case reached a critical turning point. Detectives continued reviewing the digital trail she left behind. Her financial records revealed even more disturbing details. Melissa had crafted a life in two halves. At trial, prosecutors presented their case with precision. Melissa sat emotionless during most of the proceedings. She didn't cry. She didn't react. Melissa Hartley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the weeks after the trial, Evergreen Hills slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The yellow ribbons were taken down. The flyers came off the telephone poles. Melissa had tried to craft the perfect life. But beneath the curated posts and careful image was a woman who had grown resentful, detached, and dangerous. And in the end, it wasn't a stranger or random criminal. The trial may have ended, but the story of Aaron Hartley didn't fade away. It lingered in conversations, in news specials, and in the hollow spaces of a house that once held quiet routines and gentle habits. She organized a candlelight vigil a week after the sentencing, held at the school where Aaron had taught. Journalists, true crime bloggers, and documentarians began digging into her past. What they uncovered added more layers to the already twisted narrative. Before meeting Aaron, Melissa had lived in 3 different cities over a span of 5 years. Emails recovered from Melissa's various accounts revealed she had contacted multiple insurance agencies under fake names, trying to assess whether she could increase Aaron's policy without his involvement. She was denied because his status had not yet been changed to deceased, but the attempt itself revealed her state of mind. In the days immediately following his murder, while the community was searching for us and handing out flyers, Melissa had been plotting her next financial move. Some of the emails were phrased as hypotheticals, others were bold, direct inquiries. She had studied the system, looking for loopholes, testing boundaries. It highlighted the role digital evidence could play, how a curated social media presence could mask a crime, and how even the most ordinary settings could conceal deadly secrets. It was personal. It was about a brother who never raised his voice, a son who never forgot birthdays, a teacher who believed every student could improve. His loss was not just the end of a life, but the loss of a quiet kind of goodness that rarely made headlines until it was taken away. True crime podcasts recounted the story in chilling detail, each retelling peeling back new layers of Melissa's deception. In each case, she had left abruptly, citing vague reasons: family issues, better opportunities, sudden breakups. There was no criminal record, but a pattern emerged: relationships that ended without closure, jobs abandoned without notice, acquaintances who described her as charming but hard to really know. A small plaque read, "In memory of Aaron Hartley, gentle strength, forever missed. Friends still gather there sometimes. Lauren visits every year on his birthday, leaving a single sunflower and a note." Among the boxes was a single item that hadn't raised alarms at first: a leather-bound notebook. Inside were pages of notes in Melissa's handwriting. She speaks to no one, grants no interviews, and has never offered a statement of remorse. To this day, she has never admitted to the murder. It confirmed what many had suspected: Melissa hadn't snapped in a moment of rage. Aaron didn't simply vanish. He was taken by someone who claimed to love him, someone who wore the mask of grief while burying the evidence. In the end, it wasn't the loud scream of violence that ended his life. It was the quiet, careful plotting of someone who knew him best. She had planned Aaron's death with chilling precision. Every step had been rehearsed, every potential obstacle considered. Yet in the end, it was the small details she couldn't control: the neighbor's memory, the phone's GPS, the digital timestamps that unraveled everything. Most of them appeared to be harmless lists: sarens, design ideas, vacation plans. The cheerful shutters and garden beds became symbols of something much darker. Eventually, a couple from out of town bought the property, unaware of its full history until after the papers were signed. They tried to renovate, to give it new life, but residents of Evergreen Hills still avoided walking past. Some houses hold a memory, and this one had soaked in more than paint and wallpaper. It had absorbed betrayal, violence, and silence. But tucked in the back was a chilling checklist. Each item was followed by a date. Anniversary photo, backup outfit, email Brandon about Tahoe, move Aaron's keys, clean car. The final entry read, "Quiet weekend, no mistakes." Hundreds gathered in the auditorium, many of them students who remembered his calm guidance and dry sense of humor, and how some people just weren't strong enough to cut ties. At the time, he thought it was a dramatic way of expressing her unhappiness. Now those words felt darker, more deliberate. Former colleagues stood up one by one to share stories. He looked pale, thinner than in earlier photos, and visibly shaken. He said he felt like a fool. He believed every lie she told him: that she was separated, that Aaron was out of the picture, that she was trapped in a loveless marriage and just needed time. He had even started looking at apartments for them to move in together. What haunted him most was the knowledge that he could have become a pawn in something much worse. Had Melissa succeeded, he might have ended up with her money, her future, and her secrets. His impact on others was clear. He was not the kind of man to make enemies. He had been kind, patient, and quietly generous. His death was more than a tragedy. It was a wound that would never truly close. Melissa Hartley was behind bars, sentenced to spend the rest of her life in prison. But for those left behind: Aaron's family, his friends, and his community, the damage could never be fully repaired. The ripple effect of his murder reached far beyond the courtroom. Aaron's sister, Lauren, became the unofficial guardian of his memory. Meanwhile, the deeper story of Melissa's life continued to unfold, even after her conviction. One ex-boyfriend, tracked down by an investigative reporter, shared that Melissa had once spoken about the idea of starting over Brandon Pierce. The man Melissa had been secretly seeing while still married to Aaron gave a single interview after the trial. He wasn't the only one she had manipulated. Financial records also showed she had tried to transfer funds from Aaron's retirement account shortly after reporting him missing. Investigators also revisited the storage unit where much of the physical evidence had been found. This notebook, revealed only after the trial, reignited public fascination with the case. The Hartley home was eventually sold. No one in the neighborhood wanted to buy it at first, and it sat vacant for months. In the years that followed, Aaron's story became a case study in training courses for detectives and forensic analysts. But for Aaron's family, the story never needed to be sensationalized. On the third anniversary of his death, a bench was installed at his favorite hiking trail. Melissa remains in prison, her appeals denied, her story largely over except for occasional mentions in crime retrospectives. But whether she spoke or stayed silent, the truth had already been found.